Merry Christmas everyone, Katarina here. I have one more video, a bonus video with Christmas cards for you. I picked 3 cards with a winter scene, with evergreen trees using watercolors. These cards don't take too long to make, so they are perfect if you need a last-minute card. So let's get started with the first card. It's a simple night sky with a moon and 3 silhouettes. I started with the moon, I used a washi and drew a circle, and then I used a masking fluid to cover it. But this is optional. If you don't have a masking fluid, you can just paint carefully around it. After the masking fluid was dry, I painted the background. I used dark blue, starting with a very saturated color at the top, making it lighter towards the bottom, creating a gradient. And once it was dry, I applied a second coat just to make it darker. After the second layer was dry, I removed the masking fluid. And then I added splatter using a white gouache to create snow, or these were more like stars, because snow you would add after you paint the trees. I let it dry again, and then I started painting the trees using only black paint. Sometimes I start with a line for the trunk, but this time I only painted the branches. The branches are just zigzag lines going from left to right, expanding the shape towards the bottom. First I painted a few trees using a lighter black, and then I used a very saturated black and I painted the trees in front, filling the whole row at the bottom. You can finish up the card here, but when I was looking at the card with the big moon, I thought this needed a Santa and a sleigh flying over. And I actually had a stamp, so I had to use it. However, this is completely optional. You can finish up the card as you want. I adhered the panel on top of a craft card base and added a banner with a Merry Christmas sentiment. If you would like to see the full video, click at the link at the top. I will also leave a link in the description. Now let's move on to the second card. Here I'm also painting a night sky with fir trees, but a little bit different, using lighter colors and covering only half of the card. I started with the sky. I first covered the watercolor cardstock with clean water, but you can start directly with paint. I used a dark blue, but not as saturated as on the previous card, and I also added a little bit of purple. And again, I was creating a gradient, stopping in the middle of the card. The bottom of the card is going to be white. After I was happy with the look, I let it dry, and then I applied a second layer. This time I did not do a smooth application. I applied the paint in a dabbing motion, especially towards the top. This creates a sort of a cloud texture and makes it more interesting, at least in my opinion. But if you don't want to do this, you can do a smooth application. After the panel was dry, I painted the trees. This time I used dark blue, not black. I started with lighter trees in the back, and then I used more saturated paint and I painted a few trees in front. I did not fill the full row, I left a space empty. like to add ground underneath the trees, so I used water and I applied it below the trees. And then I used blue paint and just touched the ground below the trees using the tip of my brush. The color spread around a little bit too much, so I had to do a little bit of lifting, but otherwise it was perfect. Next, I added a white splatter for the snow. You could do it this way on the first card as well. I finished up by trimming the panel and adhering it onto a white card base. The greeting I stamped right below the trees. I used a small sentiment stamp that says "Warmest wishes." Again, if you would like to see the full video, check out the link at the top or in the description. Now let's move on to the third card. Here I painted a similar night landscape with trees, but I placed it inside of a Christmas ornament. I started by drawing a circle for the ornament. I used a compass, but you could also use a cup, for example. I placed it slightly lower than the middle because there is going to be a string at the top and a greeting below it. And then I started painting. I used 3 colors: mid-tone blue, dark blue and black. I started with a mid-tone blue and I painted about half of the circle, fading it to white towards the middle. Then I used the black at the top, below it I used the dark blue. I applied 2 layers and on the second layer I did the dabbing motion again, also blending the colors together. Outside of the circle you could use a masking fluid if you prefer. The original video contains 2 cards and on the second card I used a masking fluid, but as you see it's not really needed. After the panel was dry, I worked on the ground. I first applied clean water and then I used light blue, again creating a gradient, but this time from bottom up. After it was dry, I painted a bunch of trees in different sizes using black. You could also use dark blue in this case. Here I started with a line and then I painted the branches along it. And then you also will see me finishing it up with a mid-tone blue below the trees to create sort of a shadow. To create the snow, I used a white gel pen and I painted a bunch of white dots across the sky. You could use a white paint and do a splatter, but I did not want to add any white splatter outside of the circle. For the top of the ornament, I used the gold paint and I painted first a small rectangle and on top I painted a little loop. And you can use the gold paint for the string as well, but I used a black fine liner. The greeting I decided to write myself. I usually write with a pencil first and then I go over it with the pen. I also used all the colors that I used for the painting and added splatter, and I also used the gold paint and painted the edges of the panel. But this is completely optional. And lastly, the watercolor panel I adhered on top of a white card base. As I said, the original video contains 2 cards, so if you would like to see it, click on the link at the top or check out the description below. And you can also see all the links in the corresponding blog post. So that's it, that's all the cards I have for you. These are pretty quick to make, but if you would like to see more ideas for last minute cards, I made a playlist where you can see all of them. So that's all for this video. I hope you will have amazing stress-free Christmas, and I will see you in the new year.